What's up? This is Rebel Radio.
What up? What up? This is DJ Newmark.
This is Peanut Butter Wolf.
It's your boy. It's okay.
Keep checking out Rebel Radio.
Rebel Radio.
This is Rebel Radio.
We're in the place right here. Rebel Radio is going down.
Would you say Rebel Radio?
Oh, wait. Let's do it again.
Rebel Radio.
What's up, Rebels? Welcome back to Rebel Radio, your favorite podcast where I bring you the rebels who are shaping our culture. This is our first show of the year, and if you're counting, this is our 9th season online. We kicked off in 2015, and here we are in 2024, 9 years later, still doing it. I'm so excited to bring you this episode to kick off the new year. Casey Lights is my guest, and this dude has become one of my favorite DJs. I'm listening to his music all the time. I discovered him last year. Well, I won't say I discovered him, but I learned about him. He was already out there before I discovered him. But I learned about him last year. He's a young DJ from Scotland. And he's one of the guys that I think is really bridging the gap between what I would say the old school ethos of house music, dance music culture, and kind of new EDM. If you're into dance music, you're definitely going to want to check him out. If you're not into dance music, check him out anyway. He's great. He's kind of come up under MK, who's one of the old guys who's bridging that generation gap as well. And now he's releasing on Tool Room, which is one of the leaders in tech house. If none of that means anything to you, you should dig into all of that because there's great stuff happening in that culture. And he's going to tell us some stuff about what's going on in his journey and how, you know, he's really let his creativity and curiosity lead the way. And let's just get into it right now with Casey Lights. Right on, man. I'm super excited to talk to you. I've been banging your music for a couple of years now since I first discovered it. And,
thank you so much.
You know, a lot of I'm sure you get this. You know, you find a lot of songs, a lot of tunes that you really connect with, and then you dig into the artist catalog, and a lot of times there's not that much else there. With you, man, I haven't found a song I don't like, and my wife and my son, we're all loving everything you put out, pretty much. So.
Oh, that means
really
a lot.
Excited
Thank
to
you.
talk. Yeah, right on. Well, I want to talk about, you know, what's coming up, but let's go back to the beginning. Give me a little bit of history. So first of all, do you remember the first record you ever bought for yourself?
The first record I ever bought for myself. That's a good question. No, because I think when I started like really getting into music, it was kind of through. So I'm part of a big family. I've got 3 brothers and a sister, and I'm like bang in the middle. I'm the middle child. So when I started really getting into music other than, you know, music at school and music in bands and all that kind of thing through school, like actual real kind of personal interest in music, it was kind of through my older brother.
Okay.
He's a year and a half older than me, and like it was a kind of, I suppose, a very typical older brother, younger brother situation where if he was into something, I was into it, just because, I don't know, growing up as a younger brother, you kind of have less of a mind of your own, and you kind of just like you're a bit of a sheep and you follow along those footsteps. So yeah. that was kind of the beginning of all of my I suppose my musical taste. So
okay.
As far as the first record, I don't know. I remember we used to. I remember my oldest brother bought us Red Hot Chili Peppers CD album. It was By the Way album at the time, so I guess I was, I don't know, 2000 or something like that, maybe 2001.
Okay.
We've all, like, me and all my brothers, like huge Chili's fans, and we used to go into before streaming, obviously, we used to go onto the eBay and find like the first albums, like the first two, it was like the Red Hot Chili Peppers, the first one, and so I used to love, like, really, I guess that was like kind of early stages of like really digging for stuff that wasn't like really readily available, and it was fun kind of doing that through we just, all we knew was kind of going onto eBay and finding those CDs and things that you couldn't just go into the shop and pick that stuff up. Now it's a little bit different because there's a lot more resources for that kind of thing, obviously through streaming. But that was course. We used to have a lot of fun doing that.
Do you still do that type of digging? Do you go back and look for stuff, or is it just is there too much now?
Kind of. Kind of, but yeah, in a totally different way. So
Yeah.
I love for all kind of the downsides of social media, like my phone is literally full of screenshots of like Instagram reels that are like, I'll hear something, I'll be like, what is that? Or yeah, just like someone's story where they're just like playing a cool tune or something. I'll like screenshot it, and then I'll go like I'll look it up, and
Go
if I
find
can't
it.
find it, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And like the kind of that hunt is like still yeah, I still have like that kind of the drive for the hunt for like new stuff that just like really perks my ears.
Nice.
So I still love it, but I just do it's just you just kind of adapt to the times, don't you? And
Of course.
you have a different way of doing these things.
Absolutely. Yeah, and so from Chili Peppers, and I think I understand you grew up playing jazz as well, right?
A little bit, yeah. So essentially my introduction to music was through the saxophone. We did, I don't know, I must have been like 4, 5, 6 years old or something. And at school at the time over here, I don't even know if they still do it anymore, but to see if you were kind of, I suppose, qualified or naturally qualified enough to for them to give you music, like one-on-one musical tuition, you had to do like a listening test thing.
Okay.
And apparently I excelled in that. I did really well. So I got given the opportunity to play saxophone. So yeah, I chose saxophone. And I think my mum remembers I wrote down, and we had a choice of saxophone, trombone, clarinet, a couple other things. And my mum remembers me writing on the form, like you had to kind of pick an instrument and why you chose it. And I just said saxophone because I thought it was cool. So that was kind of, which is kind of, I suppose, quite fitting, to be honest, because like anything I do now, it's like if I think it's cool, if I'm into it, then I'll do it. Or
Okay.
that's generally kind of stuck with me. But yeah, so picked up saxophone, and to be honest, just never really looked back. I know that's a bit of a cliche, but I just ran with it. It just became such a huge part of my life. I loved playing music. I loved the social aspect of music, the community aspect of music, being parts of various bands, competing, being on stage, like all of that stuff that was like just involved just by just picking up this one instrument. So I really threw myself into it, and I had really supportive parents, thankfully, and they really kind of helped me along the way and supported me along the way, which is great. And yeah, I ended up going to university after high school and did music, and I still had no. By the way, it was only, I suppose, as far as my whole lifespan is concerned, relatively recently, like decided, okay, this is absolutely what I'm going to do, because all through like my kind of musical education, I suppose, if you like, I had no idea what it was that I was going to do. I just knew I loved music, like inside and out. And I had a bit of an affinity for writing music, and I knew that early on I was really interested in, I suppose, the creative and creation side of things. I've kind of, but all of that, a lot of that reflection is kind of retrospective thinking. Like I remember having my grandparents had a piano, and at a really young age, like just being so drawn to it, and like, but I couldn't play piano. There was something about having something in front of you and actually just like making stuff up, you know. And I suppose it's kind of similar to giving a kid a crayon and a blank piece of paper, and like they just kind of go to like just love that. So that was that for me, and I think all those kind of things now make sense because there's context to it, because this is what I'm doing and this is what I love to do. But at the time, you're just a kid, that's what you do, you know.
So can you remember that moment when you're like, okay, this is my career, or this is my path? Like when that switch flipped on for you?
It was kind of it was more derived from like actually having to make a decision. When I came out of university, I guess I was 21 and still didn't know what I was going to do in my life. But I just, at that point, I had the freedom of I was just working part-time and like various different jobs. I moved back in with my parents because I would have had to have worked full-time doing a job I hated just to kind of pay rent and things.
What was the job?
Oh, I worked in a betting shop for 4 years throughout university. So if I came out and wanted to stay, I studied in Aberdeen. If I wanted to stay in Aberdeen, I would have had to work full-time there just to pay my rent and get by. And that really didn't appeal to me. So I thought I need to go home, kind of gather myself and figure some stuff out. So I then worked in a bar, and I worked in cafes, and I worked in Boots, like a drugstore, and hated that. But I think all of that was really useful though, because doing jobs you hate, you realize like how much you want to do something you love.
Yeah,
because it's really not worth spending that time doing something you don't like. So yeah, I think it was kind of a decision that I was like, okay, I'm 21 or 22 or whatever, and I need to, what is it I want to do? I thought about kind of, I still love performing, playing saxophone and a few other instruments. So I thought about joining the cruise ships actually, and joining a band in the cruise ships. And
oh wow,
yeah, I actually made like some applications, but it just seemed like quite an intense thing, and maybe with not so many prospects after it. But yeah, I just say I'd also, I guess at that stage I'd been dabbling a little bit in production and electronic music, because through university I got super involved in that just by being surrounded by kind of like-minded people, and my mates were into dance music. And
what was there a moment, so obviously you're into jazz and Chili Peppers, and what was the introduction to dance music, or was there a track or a night that really sort of opened your eyes?
Do you know what's interesting about that? Again, going back to like me kind of growing up and listening to the music that my brother was listening to, I genuinely, I think I've always loved dance music, and the simplicity of it, the kind of the repetition of it, and like the kind of trancing, like that kind of like really draws you in and keeps you there, like that kind of that feeling of dance music that just kind of grabs you and doesn't let go. I was always really aware of that as a young, but it always felt like a guilty pleasure for me, because it was like, oh, it's not like the cool kids are listening to rock music and my brother's listening to Chili Peppers. So I didn't really ever pursue it at that stage. But then you grow up and you start to care less about that stuff. And I went to Ibiza when I was 17 with my mates. And that was like, I suppose the first time that there was just, it's the first time we like properly kind of left home, I suppose. And it was just us mates, and just being wildly irresponsible and not having anyone to look after us. But yeah, and Ibiza was the perfect place for me at that point, because it really was anything goes, and it was particularly in dance music, obviously. And I just remember loving the freedom aspect of it, but also the like really like genuinely the music. And yeah, those nights I think it was like Judgment Sundays with Judge Jules on the Sunday, Cream, I think probably on a Thursday, but it was like Ferry Corsten and kind of trance guys at that point. And we saw Tiesto at big club called Privilege that's not open anymore. And those experiences, like I grew up in a small island, and that's like, you couldn't get further away from like what the kind of environment that I grew up on, as in those two polar opposite worlds. And I think there was just something about that I found so magical, and really loved it. And yeah, and then I think that was probably it, to be honest. I think I was at that point I was really hooked on dance music. And after that it was then kind of artists like Justice and Boys Noise and Daft Punk. I then kind of went back and threw myself into all those albums and was just so hooked.
Nice. And do you remember your first time on the decks playing a party? What was the feeling?
So I've got two stories about that, actually. Yeah. One of them was, one of my mates was like a resident DJ in Aberdeen, and I'd kind of started producing a bit of dance music, and he was like, oh, do you want to just come along and play a couple of tunes? And I was like, I don't know. But I went along, and that wasn't, I don't really count that, because he was there and I just literally just stood up and like kind of press playing a couple of things. But I remember being on stage and thinking, oh God, these people are looking at me. But seriously, like my first proper gig was actually and I'd been releasing records at this point, but not DJing. And so my first proper gig was actually with MK in Paris.
Oh wow.
And yeah,
that's a cool way to start.
People would say something. That's why I say those two stories, because it sounds a bit ridiculous to say my first ever gig was in another country with like one of the biggest like house DJs on the planet at the time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I was unbelievably nervous for that, and I think that I still have nightmares, a couple of moments where I nearly really messed up, but it went really well, and yeah, that was an interesting experience.
Nice. And so were you hooked immediately after that?
Yeah, because it was also the first time I'd ever actually been able to play something that I'd written. Literally, I've never written a piece of music before that point and performed it in any way, shape, or form in front of people. So I had a couple of records out at that point, and that's kind of why MK had been like a fan and supporting me, and we were talking for a bit, and that's kind of, he then took me under his wing a bit and started playing a bunch of shows with him, and I've worked with him for years since then. Yeah. But at that point, yeah, it was that was my main takeaway. Really, was I'd written this music, and I was standing up there and playing it out in front of people and actually seeing real-time reactions to it, and I don't think that'll ever get old, and I still love that. And it's still like being able to test records live and play records live is still like one of my biggest kind of tools, like when writing, because hearing something in that different like context and different environment, it really can really change a record, because it can sound totally different in a way.
So are you ever surprised by people's reactions? I saw in an interview you talked about, sometimes people reach out and they tell you how much a song meant to them. Are you ever surprised that you get a different reaction than you expected, or better or worse, or just different?
Both, yeah. Like sometimes I'll play something but so that varies as well, because that can also, you can play the same track in two different nights in the same club, or two different like countries, or with two totally different demographics. It can get completely different reactions across the board. Like, you're onto something when you're getting like a good reaction every time you play something. So that's a really special feeling, and that doesn't happen with all of them, but it's nice when it does happen. But yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think it's really great being able to test, and I feel lucky to be able to do that, because like I said, I generally, it's very seldom I'll actually release something that I haven't properly road tested yet. So I love, and I'll often take actual notes like after a show as well, with some tracks that I play, that I'll kind of think, oh, you know what, they liked that, but especially for maybe a festival, that build up could have been 8 bars longer, all that kind of thing, or that kick drum just didn't quite come through there as much as I wanted it to. So, and generally, apart from like hearing it for yourself, but most of that's based on like the reactions of the audience.
Sure. What this may not be a fair question, but what do you think MK saw in you?
I think I don't know. I don't want to say. I mean, you'd have to ask him, I suppose. But I think, honestly, I think I've kind of talked to him about this stuff before, but I think he probably saw like a little bit of himself, in the sense that we write quite similar. Like, and I've been in the studio a lot with him too, and so we're quite similar in the way that we write. Like, it tends to be like some sort of, if there's something hooky in whatever it is, like a really cool drum beat, or like a vocal that even a word or a syllable pops out at you, like kind of, you prick up your ears and grab onto that. That's the way I work. And I think a lot of the stuff that I was writing, he realized that it was, I guess, just to his music, to his taste. He loved it, and he was playing it out and presumably getting pretty good reactions from it. So I think he just saw something that he was kind of like, oh, this is a lot of the stuff that I like, that I love, and that, and he writes in a similar way. But also, I think that one of the best compliments I get a lot, and it's not by design really, it's just I've always like tried to hold on to writing music that I want to write, and doing it my way. Don't get me wrong, I fall into and have fallen into the kind of trap of trying to adapt a sound, or trying to like work on music that you think is going to mean that you can sign to this label, or that these stages are going to play it, or that you can play these shows or whatever. And that's never worked for me. I've kind of gone down that road and it's never worked. But one of the best compliments I get is that my music is quite unique. And I think it's purely because I try and block all that noise out and just kind of get down what's in my head. And I think he's told me that before, and I think maybe that's kind of early on, maybe what he sensed as well. There was something, although it was palatable and familiar sound, and there was still something unique to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. One of the things I take from your music is that it feels very modern, but there's also a classic quality. I think, especially the way you use keys and strings in a lot of your songs, feels very '90s house, but also feels present, feels current. And so I was wondering, what you said. How do you keep those influences out when when your brain wants to say, okay, I want to play this room or this label or this, I'm trying to, this thing is blowing up, so maybe I should go in that direction. How do you catch yourself and stop yourself?
That's a bit of I think it's probably different for everyone. It's a bit of a constant battle, really, though, because you're constantly trying to do the next best thing, right? Or you're constantly trying to progress and move forward. But the problem is that's not necessarily the same line as what's best for you creatively. So
Sure.
that's kind of trying to join those two paths and have them move along the same. If you can nail those two and those two things are moving along parallel, then you've nailed it. But that's quite difficult to do because sometimes the thing you've written, it might be your absolute favorite record or album you've ever done, and you poured your heart and soul into it, and you love it with every fiber of your body, but no one really listens to it and it doesn't really do anything. That's kind of hard to take because
Sure.
you love it, you want everyone else to love it, and you want to be successful. And you want to be able to take that on the road and play in front of lots of people and all that kind of thing. So that is definitely a difficult thing to have to navigate. But actually, what I've found is there are correlations between those two roads, and they not exclusively. But I find that when I write stuff that I'm really into and I'm really excited about, I think that energy does come through and people really grasp onto that, and people really, when something sounds really authentic and really genuine and I suppose unique in that way as well, that it's actually come from a person and there's the soul and there's energy to it, and you can tell that it was come from a place of real authentic creation. I think that translates really well to the listener.
So what song comes to mind when you think of that, where you really nailed that?
The ones, interestingly, the ones where I didn't think that they were going to. So the first one, actually, probably the first time I ever noticed that was the first record that ever kind of really did end for me, and it was a track called No No No. It was a dark mix called The Dark Mix of No No No. Annie Mac on Radio 1 played it 7 weeks. It was crazy. I'd released a couple of tunes before that that didn't really kind of weren't really up to much. But that was the first one. Got some great radio play. That was the first one MK started playing. I started seeing videos of other DJs playing it. Sonny Fodera was playing it. And I was like, oh, that's cool, because I loved that track. I really, really loved it at the time. I remember working in a spare bedroom in a flat I was at the time. And I was playing it with my brother, who's super into what I do as well. And he kind of writes a bit too. So he was there and I was jumping around. I was so excited about it. So being able to see that was also received that way, to a lot of the listeners and to a lot of other DJs was so exciting for me, because it was the first time I realized that my musical taste, I suppose, and what I was doing was exciting for a lot of other people too, and really related to a lot of other people. And since then, to be honest, I've got some records that I love that haven't done so well, but most of the ones that have done really well for me. And the next one kind of that comes to mind was Girl, that came out, I guess 2019 or no, maybe 2020 or 20, I can remember. But during the pandemic,
I love that song.
Yeah, and me too. I genuinely it was that year. It's embarrassing, but that was my top listened to song on Spotify on my own Spotify. I'm not even kidding, and I'd listened to it obviously.
There's nothing wrong with
hundreds
that.
of times when writing it, but I actually still love that song. So and it's my most streamed song definitely to date.
Sure.
And again, it's really nice, and to be honest, I kind of feel that that's a bit of luck as well. That just so happens that what I
Sure.
love, a lot of other people also love. But
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously, you hear a lot of stories of musicians who, they fall out of love with their biggest song that they have to then perform for the rest of their lives, and
oh, you hear that all the time.
it's a mixed blessing, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly hear that all the time. I know a lot
Yeah.
of big guys that have released something that's colossal and absolutely massive. Don't get me wrong, maybe you get a bit sick of it after the thousandth time playing
Sure.
it, but I don't know. I honestly, maybe I'll talk to you. Hopefully I have a huge hit, and then I'll talk to you in a couple of years. And I'm like, no, I hate playing that song. But honestly, like seeing people singing along to your own something that you've written and getting
Yeah.
those kind of reactions, like I don't think that it doesn't get old for me anyway. And
No, I'm sure. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So for me, it's You and Me. That song is it's a great. There's something about it, like in my mind, there's a video playing where I'm at like this shitty party, and then this song comes on, and everybody just loses their shit. And 'cause it's
cool.
and I think you have a few of those, but that one in particular is like you can't not get up and dance and feel good, and just like, and what I like about it is like it's not a hard track, it's not banging,
Yeah, no,
but it
at all.
just kind of grips you and doesn't let you go until the end. And I think
Yeah.
you're really good at doing that in a lot of your music.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about the new one. Better Times seems like it's blowing up. Seems like a good summer track.
Yeah, I was talking about this with management a couple of days ago. Actually, I've had most of my tunes that come out, it's usually a bit of a slow build. There's a bit of a buzz, and I always can tell whether something's going to do all right, because depending on the feedback and messages from people and playing it out and getting those kind of reactions.
Yeah.
But usually it's like a kind of a relatively steady trajectory.
Sure.
And this one's not that different, but there's definitely like the best start I've ever had after releasing a record. I get loads of messages, people loving it. Some great DJ supporters, like it's killing it at radio just now in the UK, which is awesome, and actually worldwide. We even we got a report in the other day. It's kind of like it's doing well at radio in Italy and the US.
Nice.
and all these really cool territories. So
Yeah.
there's clearly something about it that seems quite infectious, and is kind of quite obviously international, because it seems across the board that people are loving it, which is super exciting. So yeah, I'm really excited to kind of hopefully see it continuing to grow.
So what is you talked about social media, and there's lots of ups and downsides to social media right now, but tell me about what marketing a record like that looks like in 2023. What are you doing? What's working? What isn't? What do you love? What do you hate? I think the job of marketing a record probably has become as important as making it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's the side of it I really struggle with, because it's not a side of it you think about when you're
Sure.
in your bedroom writing music when you're younger. You're
Of
not,
course.
you don't think about, I wonder how I would market this
Right.
really shitty song that I'm writing. But yeah, it's a side of it I struggle with, because I none of that is in the studio when I'm working. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's literally about the music. And then when you've done it, you kind of just want to go, right now, everyone in the world listen to it. But obviously it's not that simple. You need to go, okay, how do we get these people to listen to it? How do we find like this little niche in Italy where some local DJs are playing it, and then it's kind of building up that way.
Yeah.
Social media is obviously like a massive part of that. Radio's thankfully still like a big part of that, because I love radio and I've always loved radio. So there's obviously promo teams that work on that side of it, but to be honest, again, a lot of even radio support comes from like if I've get like a personal connection. So like
Sure.
I spend a lot of time on the run up to a release messaging all my like kind of radio friends that I've met along the years, or and just kind of passing and DJs I've met along the way, but not even radio, like just kind of generally people I've met in the music industry. Like I try and send it out, and I did that when I wasn't even releasing it, but when I was kind of putting up bootlegs on SoundCloud, I was doing that to blogs, and that's not really changed. I still do that. I think that's still really important, and I think that personal touch when receiving a track goes a long way. So there's that. There's a lot. That's obviously really time consuming sending it to everyone personally.
Of course.
But yeah, then there's the whole campaign as far as like the kind of social media side of it's concerned, and it's just content, and labels like desperate to kind of work on like how do we kind of like reach these demographics on TikTok and what's going to make it kind of pop on and trend on Reels and Instagram and all those kind of things. And rather than my take on all that is anytime I see someone, and I feel for everyone because it's generally everyone's worst nightmare that writes music because that's what we do because we write music, not because we like going on and making TikToks. So really, I do kind of sympathize for everyone that does it. But when I go on and see something that a writer, a producer, or a band or something that's they've kind of posted a video or something, and I can always tell if it feels like a little bit contrived. Do you know what I mean? And for me, it just doesn't really grab me, and that's the way it goes. And I understand the necessity for content, but I would rather put out less content, but the content I do put out be cool and somehow attached to the record or just somehow authentic, than just flooding my feed with. And to be honest, a lot of people would that's probably the worst way of doing it. You're probably just getting out as much as possible. But
no, I mean,
I've never liked the idea of trying to come across on social media as someone I'm not. So everything we put out, I want to make sure that I'm happy with it, and it's kind of still comes across as me.
I mean, I think you're touching on something that's so central to not just music, right? But anything creative right now, right? Is that we have these algorithms that are they need more than anyone can give them. That's how they're written and designed. And you know, as fans, there's more content for us to consume than we have time and attention for.
Yeah.
So, you know, breaking through that, and I think part of it is what you said, right? Part of it is the DJs, the fans, the blogs, everyone needs to know that you care about what you're putting out, right? And that you're invested in and passionate and all that. And if you're not, then they have other things to consume their attention.
Oh yeah, they'll move on. Yeah.
Yeah. So how to get that across, right? And to break through. And as you said, relationships, you know, is part of it, but that's constantly changing. And then, yeah, the algorithms are tough. And I think you're right that, you know, it's a bit of quality over quantity, right? That just more content is not the answer. And especially when I always tell the artists that we work with, I'm like, look, if you have to hold your nose to do it, don't do it, because it's probably not going to work anyway. And then you'll just spend a bunch of time on something you hated that didn't work. It's one thing doing something you hate that works, because you're like, okay, well, at least there's a payoff, right? But if you hate doing it and it doesn't work, then, you know, that sucks. So find the stuff that you like doing and just do that the best you can.
Exactly. And I think the other thing I think about is, even if it did work, even if you spend a couple hours every single day doing something, a dance or like some sort of kind of don't know, something that was trending on TikTok or and Instagram Reels, and you were like keeping that up and you were doing it every day, and it was like really all consuming. And obviously that's going to take away from your energy, away from other things, writing other music, working on your sets, like forming other connections, doing all the other things that you need to do. Even if that did work, I always think about how sustainable is that? Like if that is what, like, I understand growth and like with what we do is really important and building that fan base. But if your fan base like rests on that, like, I think you're in a pretty dangerous place, because what happens if one day you wake up and you don't want to do that? Are they going to still stick around? Maybe, hopefully.
Maybe not. Yeah.
But maybe not. And maybe this is just because it benefits me. But I always think that like, I genuinely believe that like my kind of fans and the people that follow me are really into the music, and not because not because I was trending on TikTok for downing a bottle of tequila on stage or something. Do you know what I mean? Like that
Sure,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. And
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
nothing wrong with that. But for me, the really core and crux of everything that I do is about the music, and I want the people that follow me to understand that and be a part of that too.
Absolutely. So what's the vision from here? What are you building, and tell me about the process of how you develop that vision with your team or people around you or mentors or whatever.
Yeah. So there's like I have long-term goals and long-term visions, but day to day it's not like the forefront of my mind. I don't have like a mood board that I stare at every day and then think, oh, that's the goal. I need to be there.
Okay.
It's kind of like a bit of a day-to-day thing for me, and that's just the way I naturally work. Like I'll get up and there'll be stuff I have to do or things that have deadlines for various things. But when it comes to the music, like I mentioned, it really kind of has to come from a place of authenticity. And if I don't feel like writing something, I won't, or I'll go listen to a bunch of stuff, or if I should be doing something because I've got a remix deadline, but I've just had like this really cool idea because I drove past a busker earlier in the day that was playing a cool tune and something stuck in my head. Do you know what? All that kind of stuff like goes in, and sometimes I feel like, oh, wait a minute, there's something forming in here and I need to get it out. It's really important for me to capitalize on that. So generally day to day, like it's a bit of one kind of one foot in front of the other. But I still have I'm really happy with where we're at just now, and it's really nice to see the records performing that I'm putting out. But to be honest, like I really love the idea, and I'm kind of starting to process an idea of putting out a bit of a bigger body of work, which I don't know if there's really a space for it now, but it's something I've always wanted to do. Even just like a bit of I don't know, a 4, 5, 6 track EP, a small album, something like that, that I can kind of go in start to finish and really working, and that is the end goal. Like I'm focusing on the project as a whole rather than just having 6 records, demos I've got lying about and think, oh, that'll do that. That's an EP, I'll throw that together. Actually thinking, all right, I want to spend 6 months and write an album or write an EP and do that. That's something I like the idea of, and also just releasing something like that myself and through a label of my own. That's something I'm starting to put some ideas down and nice. Chat about. And I think it's just important to like keep yourself really interested and excited. And that goes back to what we're talking about a little about following something just because you know that it's leading you somewhere. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. You can get a bit lost in that. If you release a couple of records, like Better Times is performing really well. That doesn't mean I feel like for the next 5 years I need to write songs that sound like Better Times.
Sure.
Because you could do that, and probably people do, and you know that's fine. But for me, I want to be really engaged all of the time, and I want to make sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm excited about. So that is a priority, and that's why I'm thinking about different projects, because I'm thinking like, oh, like this is going really well, but like, what's the next thing that's going to really excite me? And I love that's what I've started collaborating a lot more than I ever used to, because I really get excited about working with different artists that from different genres and backgrounds, and I've really found a lot of enjoyment and creative fun in that, and that's where the collaboration with Lapsley actually came from.
Nice.
I'm a fan of hers for a while, and we kind of managed to get together for a session, and I just loved writing with her. I'd never written with anyone kind of like her before, in the way that she writes or the music that she'd done before, really. So that was fun. And yeah, down the line even further, I've always had, it's always kind of sat there at the back of my mind, the idea of scoring for movies and TV and all that kind of thing.
Cool.
So I think that'll play its part hopefully at some point. It's not something I'm really actively pursuing, but there are some discussions. I was kind of actually approached by about some music for a video game at some point. So I'm kind of I love the idea of that kind of thing, and maybe just every now and again taking a bit of an avenue down there and seeing that. But yeah, I think just kind of spreading myself a bit as well, and just doing different things and working with different artists and producing for different people. And for me, it's really is about keeping engaged and keeping excited.
So one of the things, I don't know if it's generational, but definitely a lot of people I have on this show, and for myself, I think guys my age, one of the biggest lessons we end up with is we wish we had learned earlier on to ask for advice, ask for help, or accept the advice that was coming our way. And again, that might be a generational thing, but who do you go to? Where do do you bounce ideas off of MK or the Tool Room folks or management, or where do you go when you need help?
Kind of, yeah. I've got a small network of friends that I still like 10 years ago when I was kind of writing music and sending them stuff. I still send stuff to them. I mentioned, my brother's really into it and he produces music. So he's always a great one to send music to. And people, it's really important that wherever I'm going for advice or just to bounce musical ideas off of, that I know I'm going to get like an actual real true response, not someone going, oh yeah mate, that sounds great, like it sounds amazing. Like I need someone to go, I don't know. So my girlfriend she's great for that, because she's just brutally honest. She'll say, nice, not really. Or usually actually I'll be working on something, she'll come up and she'll stand at the door and she'll be like, oh, that sounds really cool. And I'm like, oh cool, I thought that was cool too. And then that kind of outside influence coming in is really important to me. But I trust. I've kind of got a small team around me, my managers and whoever the label I'm working with, and kind of DJ peers that when I say a small network, it really is just like a kind of handful of people. And I feel lucky to have that, because I feel like, particularly with kind of my whole team, we've all got the same interest, and and we all want to go in the same direction, and that's not always the case with these things. Absolutely. So yeah, I feel quite lucky to have that.
Nice, that's awesome. Well, I have a question. My son Justin is 13, and he's starting out learning to DJ and producing house beats. Amazing. He kind of started at the beginning of COVID, just started working on beats, and we got him set up and all that. And so I asked him if he had a question for you. And so he wants to know, he asked me, what do you do when you get stuck in the middle of writing a song? You've got the basics down, but it's not done. And you don't, and maybe you don't know where to go from there. What do you do to snap out of that, or to resolve that?
That is a great question. A really, really great question, because as he already knows, I'm sure, that happens all the time. Yeah. So what I do is think about, if I'm not feeling something, if I'm not excited about something, honestly, I keep going back to that, but that really is like the core of like, I need to find that path, like that little groove of like being like really enthusiastic about something. If I'm not in that, if I fall out of that, if I'm feeling like I'm a few hours into the day and I'm kind of working on something and I'm thinking, what am I going to do for dinner? Or like, I'm getting a bit bored or whatever. Then the same kind of enthusiasm is probably not going into the music, right? So it's probably not worth continuing down that road. So either, and that's by the way, very dependent on probably the mood you're in and what's happened the day before, and all those, like all of the external influences you can imagine, like impact you creatively, obviously. So my advice would be, don't just power on, don't just work on it and hope that something will come out the other end. For me anyway, everyone works differently. I would remove myself from the situation, maybe listen to some music you wouldn't normally listen to, listen to something you love listening to, and just try and remove yourself from it, and then come back and try a different approach, or just try and do something completely different. Like if you're working on a house track and you're stuck or you can't find a kick drum and it's still starting to kind of you're kind of losing a bit of that kind of excitement, you're losing a bit of energy, a bit of juice, then think, do you know what, I'll save that, I'll stick in a folder and I'm going to write a hip hop track for a couple hours.
Nice.
And
then do you ever go back to the stuff that wasn't working and you find a way?
Well, yeah, what usually happens for me is like if I say I'm gonna work on a hip hop track or like I'm just gonna write like a really cheesy pop record or something like that, I usually get half an hour in and think, oh, here's a cool idea, and then I'll kind of bring back some of those other elements that whatever I was working on before, and it forms
Oh, I
something
love
really
that.
really cool. And I
That's
think
great.
it's just rather than like putting your head down and the blinkers on and running down a straight line, just taking like a bit of an approach where you're kind of going somewhere else first, but then it takes you back, and yeah, just bringing all these ideas together. And I think for me, that's always what really helps, and looking for different stuff. Like actually, I released a great example. Actually, is a track I worked on that I released last year called Daydreamer. Came from a similar thing. I was working on just an original track. I had like a beat down, and I was kind of trying a few different things. It wasn't really happening. So I opened up Spotify, and it was like guitar folk songs or something. I'd searched like something. I don't know any guitar folk music, but that was I found a playlist that was guitar folk, and I found a song in there called Angie by a guy called David Graham, who died 10, 15 years ago or something. And apparently 1960, whatever it was actually like a big folk tune at the time. Anyway, the first 4 seconds of that, I was scrolling through a couple of them. The first 4 seconds of that like grabbed me instantly. It was just like this really cool hook. And so like I ended up replaying it. I played like a tiny bit of guitar, not good. I replayed it, like threw it into whatever I was working on, and just turned into this thing just from that moment of going like, I'm bored here. Let me find something where I am engaged, and so yeah. And that was for me. I think about that myself. If I'm ever working on something that's just not really happening, I think, well, let me do something else. And even
That's
it might
great.
not even be musical. Just like go for a walk or go meet a
Sure.
friend or something, and you might come back with just this new kind of energy, or you might have heard something on the street. Yeah, anything, all that stuff's like all goes into the melting pot.
I love that. Thank you for that. I'll share that with him.
Yeah, I mean that was a really long-winded answer, but
No, it's a
I
great
think
one.
you get
That's
the
a great one.
idea.
Yeah, that's great because I think you have at least it, and maybe it's different when you have a kid, but party wants to tell him you got to keep pushing through, right? Don't give up because just scrapping it and going to play Call of Duty is not going to get you. You're never going to get that song finished, right?
Totally. And that still applies, by the way. Like
Sure.
you're not going to get a song finished if you don't finish it.
Right. Yeah, and so it's that balance, right? But at the same time, you can't always muscle your way through everything. Sometimes you gotta distract your brain and go do something else, or like you said, go take in some new influences that you hadn't thought about. That's great. I love it. Well, I got a little lightning round before I let you get to your evening. What's your favorite city to travel to?
This lightning round might not be so lightning, by the way. I'm not the quickest of it.
That's all right.
My favorite city to travel to, Porto.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Nice.
by the way, I've only traveled there once, but I loved it so much that I'm really excited to go back.
Amazing.
But yeah, so that was the first thing that came to mind because I played a festival there last year, and just the city just blew me away. I stayed for a few days and loved it. So yeah.
Oh, that's very cool. Nice. I've never been, so I'll have to watch out for that.
Oh yeah.
Who's your favorite DJ?
Favorite DJ? Black Coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually saw him, and I mean, I love all of his music and stuff, but I was, I think it was Miami Music Week years ago. I was in one of the clubs, Live or something like that, and I was just with a bunch of friends, and we were just up having a drink. I genuinely didn't even know who was playing, and the music I was sitting there chatting things, and the music was just so good, and what he was doing was just so good. And for me, like, it really epitomizes what a DJ should do. Like, I honestly wasn't even there to see him or listen to music, and I was just hanging out, and I ended up just like standing watching him and dancing, and just it was like so grabbed in by what he was doing. So I think about that sometimes as like that's for me, that's like the ultimate goal as a DJ, being able to have that influence and power over your audience.
Yeah, that's so cool. I had a similar experience. I kind of knew his music and liked it, but I didn't know that much about him, and I literally stumbled into the Sahara tent at Coachella he was playing.
Oh, cool.
And it just grabbed me. I just couldn't leave. It was
Yeah.
incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, exact same thing.
That's so good. What's the last great book you read?
Oh, I'm not a big reader. So what would I say? How would I answer that? Do you know what it is? I've never really been able to read that. Like, I'm always like, I read a lot of like nonfiction stuff. So the
Okay.
last book I've I've probably read was, and I didn't even get through the other end because I'm just like, my focus is so bad. But Sapiens, I love
Oh
that.
yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
Right on.
Absolutely fascinating.
That's cool. What movie do you think you've seen the most in your life?
Oh wow. What movie have I seen the most? Probably a toss up of Step Brothers and my my girlfriend and all of her family are like Harry Potter nuts. So like I've seen the Harry Potter, like the whole of the Harry Potter series.
Nice.
We watch it every single year, and we've been together for 10 years, so I've seen it at least 10 times.
Amazing. That's awesome. Who's somebody you've learned a lot from, but you've never met?
Oh, that's a really interesting one. Learned a lot from, but never met. That's a great question, but like nothing really jumps to mind instantly. But I bet there must be loads, especially with social media, because you feel like you know famous people, don't you? Or
Sure.
like when you follow someone that you're super into, you kind of feel like a personal connection. I think I've always I actually never met Annie Mac, and she's someone I love listening to. I think she's an amazing interviewer.
Absolutely.
And she really I think she really helped my career because she played a lot of my records on the radio, but also just as listening to her shows when she was on Radio 1,
Sure.
listening to her shows really helped me understand. Like, she just has a really cool taste in music, I think. So I was always, I kind of loved watching her DJ kind of, again, I don't think I even ever saw her DJ live, but just kind of live sets and things. I was just always really fascinated by the music she would play. And it all just felt like it came from like a place of just like having the most fun. And there was just this energy about her that I think about sometimes when I think she's just a great person in the industry. So
yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one. Last question. If I worked for you, if I was on your team somehow, what's something I would hear you say over and over?
Something positive, hopefully. And not screaming some sort of Scottish profanity or something. I don't know. What would I say a lot? I'm trying to think, because my managers are American, and they'll often pull me up and stuff as well, where I'll say something all the time, but it will be like some sort of Scottish slang or something like that.
Is that right?
Yeah, and they always find it hilarious. But
what's a favorite bit of Scottish slang that we probably don't know over here?
Well, he in particular, like one of my managers, Mark, he loves when I say, if I say I'm going out the weekend or something, or say something along those lines, he'll say, "Are you getting steaming?" Because I'd always say, I was steaming last night, or I was steaming, which just means drunk. So
okay,
yeah, he loves
That's
that.
a good one. Yeah, we don't know that over here.
Yeah,
that's cool. Right on, man. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Love talking with you, and as I said, I love everything you're doing. We'll be watching and seeing the great things coming next.
Thank you so much. Thanks. It's been really great to chat.
Yo, that was Casey Lights on Rebel Radio. I hope you enjoyed it. I know I did. Leave us a comment, a question, suggest another guest. Tell us whatever's on your mind. Hit us up on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, whatever that's called now. It's at Rebel Radio Net. And most importantly, come back next week for more Rebel Radio. Peace.